Hi, I'm Missy with On William Street, and we are here to help you become a more confident quilter, from the piecing to the quilting and everything in between. This week we are working on block 8 of our online skill builder quilting bee, and this one is a square in a square. So first we need to get all of our fabric cut out. So for this block you're going to need one white square that is 7 1/4 inches, one that is 6 1/2 inches, and then 3 that are 5 1/2 inches. And don't worry, we will post all of these instructions in the blog, so you don't have to remember all of them right now. We need one gray square that is 5 1/2 inches, 4 yellow squares that are 4 3/4 inches. Our dark green needs to be 3 1/2 by 6 1/2 inch strips, and then our light green, and 4 of those. And then our light green, we need 4 squares that are 3 7/8 inches. So for the first step of this block, we actually need to create 4 flying geese. Now, if you need some more in-depth on how to create a flying geese, refer back to block 3. That's where we really focused on flying geese, but we are going to run through those steps fairly quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our white square, the 6 1/2 inch, no, sorry, the 7 1/4 inch white square, so the largest white square. We're going to take our light green blocks, these are the 3 7/8, and we're going to lay 2 of those on in each of the opposite corners. We're then going to draw a line from corner to corner, and then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam on each side of that line. So I'm using a fabric heat erase pen. You can use pretty much anything you want for this. Just make sure that you're testing it on your fabric first to make sure that there's no issues with it. For this next step, we're going to take another one of those squares. We're going to lay it in this corner, and then again do the same thing. Draw a line from corner to corner, sew a 1/4 inch seam on each line, and then we're going to repeat with the second section as well. And then after you've sewn those, you want to make sure that you're cutting out on the line. And one thing with pressing with flying geese is we always press towards that smaller square. This is just going to make things so much easier when your geese is complete to line things up so your points are nice and smooth. Now that our flying geese are complete, we're going to go ahead and sew them to our dark green strips. And you're going to want the point of that white section to meet. So we'll layer these on, take them over the machine, and just sew our 1/4 inch seam. Once all of your flying geese are complete, let's go ahead and just double check them and trim them up if we need to. So we want these to be 3 1/2 by 6 1/2. So you might need to do just a little tiny bit of trimming. If I can get it lined up like it's supposed to. Yep, so we'll just trim off that little bit on each end, so that it will line up really nicely with our dark green strip. Now we're ready to put our square in a square sections of this block together. So we're going to need our yellow pieces. We're going to need the white squares that are 5 1/2 inches, and then the gray square that is 5 1/2 inches. We're going to set the yellow aside for just a minute and focus on the white and the gray. So what we need to do to complete this square in a square is we need to take our larger 5 1/2 inch squares, and we need to line up from point to point, and we need to cut on that line. Now remember, this is going to create bias edges now for us, so we want to make sure that we're not stretching that fabric, and you can refer back to our block that focuses on bias edges for that if you have any questions on how to do that. Oh, it came apart on us. And I love our rotary cutting mat for this, because then you don't have to move the block, you move the mat. So we've got those 4 squares, and we're going to start with just our gray on all of the pieces, but you'll cut the white the same way. So we're going to take our white, we're going to want to find our center. So I like to just fold it in half, give it a finger press right there in the center. And then we're going to take our gray triangle and we're going to match that point up in the center. So you're going to notice that the gray is going to overlap on each end of that yellow fabric, and that is to account for our 1/4 inch seams. And then we'll take this over to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam along that line. We've got all of our grays on here, and then you're just going to repeat with each of your yellow blocks. So each yellow block is going to have one gray on one side, and it really doesn't matter which side, because as you turn your block around, you're going to be able to put it on the right side. Just make sure that you've got the one gray, and then we're going to repeat with the white. So as I mentioned, we're cutting them the same way that we cut the gray. So we have 3 white triangles for each of these blocks, and then the same thing, we're going to line it up. In this, we have not ironed this gray yet. You can do the opposite side before you iron that. Just make sure you're lining it up along that crease again. Take it to the sewing machine and sew that 1/4 inch seam, and then you're going to want to iron before you go to the other 2 sides. Now we are ready to do our corners on the opposite side. So again, we're going to want to fold that in half and make sure that you're lining those yellows up. Get your finger press right there in the middle, and then we're going to do 1 white on each side. Line that point up, and then go ahead and sew down that line, and then the same with the opposite side. We're going to again just line the point up and then sew that 1/4 inch seam. The block is complete. Now if you need to do any trimming on this block, because we do want it to end up being a 6.5 inch square, make sure that you're trimming that from the center, because we want to make sure that we've got the 1/4 inch seam and we're not going to be cutting anything off. So the best way to do that is to find that center, which is going to be 3 1/4 on your cutting mat, place it there, and we are actually really pretty square, so I'm not going to worry about trimming too much. We've got a little bit on this end is all, but placing that 3 1/4 inch mark right there in the center is going to help keep that nice and square. We're trimmed, ready to go, and then you're just going to repeat that with your remaining blocks. Now we can go ahead and sew this full block together. So we're going to lay it out. I'm actually going to move my board. So that 6.5 inch white square, that is going to be our center. We're going to take our flying geese blocks, and they're going to go on each side. And hopefully this is big enough in the screen that we can see it all. Do we need to pull it back? Okay. And then these are going to be our cornerstone sections. So we're going to lay these out with the gray matching into that center, and the white on each of the outside corners. And then we can go ahead and just sew these rows to each other. This we can do very simply with chain piecing, and then sew the 3 rows together, and this block is complete. Now we have block 8, so this one's great. It gives you a little bit of a refresher of your flying geese, and we've got 4 square and a square, so we can really practice those nicely. And check back with us in a couple of weeks, and we're going to show you some ideas of how to quilt this block. And make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell so that you're reminded every time we post a new video, and we will see you next week.